like nice to know where you started and where you end up. The first castle that was actually built on this site was made out of wood. Built very quickly to put down the rebellion by the people of the north of the country. That was everybody on this side of the River Trent. In 1066, Harold was beaten by William the Conqueror at the Battle of Hastings. Now, we didn't actually like him because he was French and we couldn't understand the word he was trying to tell us to do. And so we said if he tried to cross the River Trent, we would stand against him. And that's what necessitated the building of the castle. It remained a wooden castle for its first 100 years. Then it was knocked down by Henry II and rebuilt in stone. He gave that castle to his youngest son, John. We call early John, don't we, from the Robin Hood tales. So, John later fell out with his elder brother Richard, and it was from that point onward that the castle began to develop. It was John that started putting in defensive walls and ditches. His son, Henry III, he built the gatehouse where you bought the ticket. It was also him who put the big curtain wall all around the side. Each successive king then modernised, beautified and improved the defences of the castle. So by the 15th century, we got the best castle in the whole of Midlands. The last builder here was Richard III, but he left Nottingham Castle to meet Henry Tudor on the battlefields of Bosworth. It was rather unfortunate for English castles that Henry Tudor won that battle, because then the way England was ruled changed. Up until then, we had very hands-on kings. They went around the country holding royal courts and assizes, but the Tudors centralised government in London and sent out administrators to do all that boring stuff that the kings used to do. The castles weren't really needed anymore, and a lot of them fell into disrepair. And in fact, during the Tudor period, a lot of castles were completely destroyed altogether. Nottingham was actually spared that fate, but was never repaired again. By the time the Tudor period was over, well, toward the Tudor, we're things straight. Right. When we got Henry VIII on the throne, we'll go at it that way, holes had already begun to appear in the walls of the living quarters. The governor of the castle at the time wrote to Henry and asked if repairs could be done. And Henry's response to that was to send some nice wooden tapestries to hang over the old and keep out some of the drafts. So it shows he wasn't really that bothered about the castle. When the Tudor dynasty was over, we had the Stuarts on the throne. The first of those was James VI of Scotland and first of England. And he granted the lands here to the Duke of Rutland. He owns Beaver Castle out near Melton Mowbray, and he used Nottingham Castle like his own personal scrapyard. Anything he needed to repair Beaver Castle, he came and took from Nottingham. So he had the roof, the lead, glazing, timber, tile, anything he needed. Very quickly, without his roof, the elements can get to work on the site and it becomes a ruin. At the time the Civil War broke out here in 1642, very little was left of the castle at all. But what was left of it was inhabited by John and Lucy Hutchinson, and they were the governors throughout the Civil War. When the Civil War was over, we had no king. We chopped his head off. We had Lord Protector of England, Oliver Cromwell. He became corrupt. John Hutchinson lost his trust in him, and so he asked Parliament if Nottingham Castle could be completely destroyed. Parliament agreed, and when next Oliver Cromwell came to Nottingham Wall, he found on the hill was a big heap of rubble. Now Nottingham folks then used to leave a nice useful heap of rubble laying about, and so bit by bit became a stone lay, used it to build all sorts of other things all over the town. So I can actually promise you my hand on my heart, Nottingham's medieval castle is indeed still here in Nottingham. Good luck finding it. Now, when the Civil War was over, lands here were granted to William Cavendish, 1st Duke of Newcastle. Now he'd also been a royalist throughout the Civil War, and he'd spent most of his Civil War in exile in places like Poland and Italy. That's where he saw buildings like this, and they were the inspiration for this version of the castle. So in 1680, he completed this version. Now he really needed it to kickstart his political career, as he was a Tory MP. Now he didn't actually have any money. He was completely broke when he came back to England. she didn't actually want him to have this castle, so we had to wait for her to die so to get his hands on her cash and start building it. It was only a metre off the ground when the first Duke died himself, so we never actually saw it finished. The second Duke completed it, and he put the statue of his father on the walls, and there was what was originally the doorway. The steps that come up from that side is to either side of the doorway from that door. And the end above the doorway was a family name, Newcastle, not Nottingham, one people at all. Now, why on earth would you build a castle here in 1680? Well, in 1680, Nottingham was a very, very beautiful market town. And the one thing we were really, really good at here was pampering the rich. We built covered bathing on the River Trent if you fancied it. There were gallops for the horses on the meadows. We had wonderful theatres and pubs. We were world famous for our beers, which were kept in our rock cellars. So people with money came to Nottingham. But by the time the 4th Duke of Newcastle came to inherit the site, that was in the 1800s, and things were very, very different in Nottingham. People had been forced off the land by the Enclosure Acts, and when they arrived in Nottingham looking for work, they found the only place they were actually allowed to build a home was in the marsh area at the base of the cliff. There was no proper sanitation, poverty was appalling. The average life expectancy in 1831 in Nottingham was only 11 years old, which is probably the worst recorded anywhere in the world, and when you think of some of the things that have gone on in the world, it's pretty bad. If you were a young lady in those days, you would most likely have to resort to prostitution in order to make your living, and your gentlemen would be happily being burglars, murderers and grave robbers. The children, they would be forced to use the stocking frames, and this is why they died so young. Because of the poverty, they had to work from a very young age, which meant they had to get on these stocking frames as soon as they could get on the box and reach, and it damaged their internal organs. They couldn't digest the food properly, so they did literally starve over the period. In 1831, a bill went through Parliament called the Reform Bill. What the Reform Bill meant to these poor folks who were starving down in the marshes was that it was the first time ever they would get voting rights. And when you've got voting rights, you can have some kind of say in where you live, and of course the conditions you're going to live in. So when the 4th Duke of Newcastle stood up in the Houses of Parliament and had the bill thrown out, the people of Nottingham rioted. They started at his main residence, which was College Hall on the other side of town, tore off his gates room in the River Trent, and then got completely drunk on the contents of his cellars. They came across the town to the market square where Goose Fair was in full flow. They had more to drink, gathered more people to them. And then singing the songs that they'd heard in the fair, they came up the hill and they put through the windows and they set fire to the building. It burned with such ferocity that you could see the flames 30 miles away in Leicester. The roof literally melted and poured down the other side of the walls. The Duke of Newcastle sued the Corporation of Nottingham for compensation. He was told he wasn't getting one single penny. So he applied to another organisation, the Broxtowe 100. They were a group of employers. They stopped the working people's wages and they raised the Duke's compensation to the tune of £25,000. The Duke refused to spend any of that money on the repair of the building. He said he was going to leave it here as a testament to the stupidity of the people of Nottingham. 40 years later, the stupid people of Nottingham employed a local architect, a man called T.C. Hine, to rebuild the castle. Not as a party palace for some rich old duke, which is what it had been used for in the past, but as the first municipally owned art gallery and museum outside of London. And that's what we've used this building for ever since. So, get on with the tour then. it is hanging there because I'm actually doing an adult version of this tour tomorrow night, and he's going to come bowling down the steps. That's if he stays there that long. Okay, so when the Dukes of Newcastle first acquired the site, the first thing they did was chop the top off the hill, and they reduced it by approximately the height of the building that's here today. So the medieval building started about 3 feet above the roof. It left exposed this spiral staircase. This used to go all the way to the top of the keep, safest place in any castle is keep. But actually, spiral staircases aren't quite interesting in themselves. It was Edward I who first brought them to England. He'd also been off doing crusading, and he'd seen these incorporated into castles out in the Midlands. What he realised was they are actually the perfect defence of a corridor, because one right-handed swordsman standing at the top has the room to draw his weapon and to slice downwards, but right-handed swordsmen coming up have neither the room to draw their weapon or slice anywhere. Now in films you see soldiers coming up the hill, coming up the stairs with the sword already drawn, like so. I hold my hands like that because that is the approximate spacing of hands on the hilt of the English broadsword, laid somewhere near that wall. You do not have the room between the step you're trying to get up and the one above your head to carry the sword in that way. The other thing you see in films is soldiers running up the steps with the swords to the side of them, like so. But in a real attack you'd have a man at your front and a man at your back. So all you're going to get that way is zoom and kebabs. This is not going to work out. The only way this defence can fall is if you can find a left-handed swordsman to lead your attack. Unfortunately, in medieval England, you'd be burned at the stake or drowned for witchcraft if you're left-handed, so nobody's going to be admitting it anyway. So the perfect defence of a corridor is to build in a spiral staircase. It's that little gate across there now. Like doing I Ching. You know what I Ching is, where you toss a coin and on the heads or tails in the different series. That's your fortune. You know what I mean? When I bring tours down, sometimes all of them stand on that side and some of them all stand on this side. And I never understand what it is that makes them decide which side they're going to stand on.
I think it's the first person.
Yeah.
Who stands.
Still like doing the I Ching. Okay. Billions of years ago, before all the continents separated out into the landmasses we recognise today,
there was only one landmass on the planet. It was called Pangaea. Through Pangaea ran a mighty freshwater river. Every year it would flood and recede and put down a sandstone deposit. And what we're standing in is actually that riverbed. You can see the years when it was really rainy, brought a lot of stones down with it. Years that were less rainy, just brought the silt and the sand. The rock has its own name. It's called Triassic Bunter Sherwood Sandstone. And when the Romans arrived in Nottingham around about AD 79, they discovered that Nottingham was already quite heavily inhabited, but people didn't live above the ground in houses. They buried into the rock in caves. They called us Spendlecarlam. The ancient name for Nottingham is Tigiochobach. Both words mean the same thing, the city of caves. When the Vikings arrived here, they were led by a man called Snotgas. Snotgas created the first recognisable hamlet of houses above ground, and that became known as the Hamlet of the Snots. Eventually, that got turned round, and we became Snottingham. When the Normans arrived, they dropped the S, and that's when we became Nottingham. Now, I personally think that's a shame, because I think football results on a Saturday afternoon would be loads more fun if they left that one alone. But then again, maybe Forest and County already have enough problems with that being known as the Snots. The next section of steps has no handrail to help you, I'm afraid. The steps are very uneven and covered in sand, and the edges are nicely worn. So please be very careful as we go down there. Okay, now here we stand at the bottom of that spiral staircase, and it's a tunnel known as Mortimer's Hole. It's named after a man called Roger Mortimer. He was the lover of Isabella, and Isabella was the wife of Edward II. What Isabella and Mortimer are famous for is murdering Edward II. It really was a murder most foul. In 1327, they kidnapped Edward and they took him off to Berkeley Castle in Gloucestershire, where if they could arrange it, they wanted him to die of natural causes. So they put him in a well up to his armpits in freezing cold water, in the hope that he would catch pneumonia or something and just die. Didn't even catch a cold. So they put lots of other things in the water with him, things like rotting carcasses of animals, fish, vegetables, anything that would putrefy, because then the king would, of course, get ill and just die. No! All Edward II got was very, very angry, and of course he could not be allowed to escape, because if he had, he would have chopped all the heads off for him. So how do you kill a king and get away with it? Well, the first thing you have to understand is Edward's lifestyle choices. If I said that Edward preferred the company of gentlemen to the company of ladies, I'm sure you all know what I mean. Good. They took the door of Berkeley Castle, they tied poor Edward face down on the door, hollowed out a cow's horn and pushed it right at the king's bottom. Heated a poker to red hot, pushed it through the cow's horn and into the king's internal organs. A bit like medieval microwaving, really. Cooked the king from the inside out, but it left no mark on his body, which could not be otherwise explained. Do not try this at home, by the way, because forensic science has moved on somewhat since the 14th century. Okay. So for the next 3 years, Isabella and Mortimer rule England illegally. And because the rule is illegal, she becomes completely paranoid. So much so that they put in certain security measures at every castle they visit. She would bring with her her own locks and her own keys. She would personally go around at the end of each day and lock each one herself. And then when retiring for the night, would take the keys with her and sleep with them under her pillow. The other security measure that was put in place was to stand down the local garrison and put in their own faithful Welsh mercenaries in their place. And eventually that was their undoing. In 1330, several things happened, one of which was that Edward III, now 18, was rightfully legally able to rule in his own right. And, of course, Isabella wasn't too keen on giving up her right to rule. There was a huge conference held here at Nottingham Castle. Isabella and Mortimer were due to attend, but it meant that Edward III knew exactly where his mother and father were going to, his mother and her lover were going to be for some period of time. It enabled him to get his own plot together. The people he embroiled in his plot were none other than the displaced garrison of Nottingham Castle and the guy with the keys to the 8 gates that protected this secret tunnel. Now, of course, there isn't much point in having a secret tunnel if everybody knows where it is. So, Isabella, Mortimer, and all the knights that were here knew anything about it. On the 19th of October, Edward III, the displaced garrison of Nottingham Castle, the guy with the 8 keys, simply marched all the way up the tunnel when they found Roger Mortimer in conference with the Earl of Ely. I'm just hoping nobody breaks that thread because that head is just going to go bowling straight down here, which will look fantastic on my tour tomorrow. But I don't fancy climbing up there to put it back again. Sorry, anyway. Found Roger Mortimer in conference with the Earl of Ely. They took him back to London where he was tried for regicide and treason and then hung as a pauper on Tyburn Hill. I keep hearing it bumping, can you hear it on the side of the tunnel? Oh dear. Oh yeah, right. His body was chopped into 4 pieces. The 4 pieces going to the 4 corners of the kingdom. But his head was chopped off and stuck on a rusty old spike on London Bridge as a warning to anybody entering the capital by either the road or the river. Don't mess with the kings and queens of England. Now, just because you've been able to see that head because it's blown out, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do tomorrow. Right. This is all going to be filled with smoke. Okay. And the head at this point, because there is another little bit to this story, see, after it had been on London Bridge for a while, it had got really rotty and snotty and what have you, but they decided to bring it back to Nottingham to show the people of Nottingham, you know, not to support, you know, false kings as well. And they brought it back and they just climbed all the way up to the top of the tunnel with it when the bag had rotted that they brought it in, and the bottom fell out of the bag and his head went rolling all the way back down to the tunnel, bottom of the tunnel again. Hence why Mortimer's head is hanging up there, spinning around like jolly O tonight. And I say it's going to look brilliant with the fog tomorrow, but just hope it's going to stay there that long. Right. Isabella, she got packed off to a convent, given a pension of £3,000 per year and told to behave herself, otherwise she would be suffering the same fate as her lover. Edward III, though, he was one of the best kings England ever had. He reigned for 50 years, he had 1 wife for the King Hanolt, to whom he remained faithful throughout their entire marriage, which is quite remarkable for a modern English king, never mind a medieval one. And they had 13 children, which sorted out the succession quite nicely. And he's a very chivalrous man, actually. He built a round table. He modelled his reign on Arthur. And he built a round table at, which castle was it? I remember before I get to the bottom of the hill, but it was only re-earthed 2006, Christmas 2006. That's one of the ones in London. The Queen lives there. Not Balmoral.
Windsor?
Windsor. Yeah, that's the one. Just won't come in my head for a minute now. I'm just worried about this head. I'll move away then. If I don't see it, I'm not going to be worried by it. No, if any of them move, put your foot on them. Oh, God. We're doing children's tours, or sliders down to the festival. Little rings, see what's about, yeah? Rings and sliders and all sorts. church is a sniper tower. Everything in down. So we sent a couple of guys down here to knock a few small holes into the side of the tunnel with the idea of poking rifle through without the risk of his own being shot. Start tapping away at the rock bit and the fault line that runs along this section, and the whole lot just caved in. Hutchinson came down and surveyed the damage, and then ordered all rubble to be cleared away. And that's when he realised that he doesn't actually need rifle here, because now he can track cannon in. That's slightly more effective. It took 2 hits from the cannon placed at that end to completely throw up the bridge. And on top of what he was attacked from that side, it meant he could concentrate all of his firepower onto St. Peter's Church. Once he cleared the snipers out of there, he had the church demolished. It was rebuilt the same year as this version of the castle, 1680. So now we know it's a gun place, we know what all the holes are for. It's obvious, isn't it? It's to stick balls in, sort of rolling off down the hill in the middle of battle. It had another use as well. You see, I think this Civil War didn't really matter which side you were on. 2 things for sure. One, you're very unlikely to get paid, and the other is you're very unlikely to get fed, not by anybody who lives on the hill anyway. That is why the support of the town is so important. It's the town that feeds the garrison. But it does mean that the soldiers who are here are hungry for a long time. When you go and make your men hungry, as all ladies well know, they go getting all inventive, don't they? And what they did here was they lined out the cannonball holes with nesting materials, and they encouraged the birds. And then when they were up here on look-out duty, they snapped up the wet that way. It proved to be a really successful way of producing food. And by the 1800s, big shed had appeared sticking outside of the cliff. And now they were exclusively and they were no longer after the eggs. They were after the 2 reconfirmed birds and swabs. It became very fashionable in houses of that period to fry them with that for the breakfast. Look, crunchy on the beak, but very nutritious. Very nice and scrappy then. Okay, next section tunnel is very, very slippery. If you do not use the handrail, one of you is going to slide on your bum. Now that's actually quite entertaining for the rest of us, but it's not